Boris Johnson calls for tougher prison sentences as he visits the scene of Friday's attack on London Bridge. The attacker was a convicted terrorist. Usman Khan had spent time behind bars for an al-Qaeda-inspired bomb plot. More deaths as protests continue in Iraq, a day after the Prime Minister, Adel Abdul Mahdi, said he'd resign. At least 21 people were killed in Friday's protests. And on the island of Malta, protesters gather outside the Prime Minister's offices, calling again for his resignation over the 2017 murder of an investigative journalist. Hello and welcome back to the France 24 newsroom. I'm Claire Pride. We start with the UK's Prime Minister and Home Secretary going to the scene this Saturday of yesterday's knife attack. 2 people were killed and 3 injured. Police shot the attacker, Usman Khan, dead. We now know that Khan spent several years behind bars for terrorism offences and was wearing a tag at the time of the attack. He'd been out of prison on parole for just over a year, so now questions are being asked about the UK's criminal justice system. Here's the Prime Minister's response.
We want to toughen up sentences for serious and violent offences, and I've said for a long time now that I think the practice of automatic early release, where you cut a sentence in half and let really serious violent offenders out early, simply isn't working, and I think you've had some very good evidence of how that isn't working, I'm afraid, with this case.
And now I'm joined by a terrorism expert, Antoine Jardin. Hello, thank you very much indeed for your time. We just heard the UK's Prime Minister there, Boris Johnson, calling for tougher prison sentences. Is that the answer, do you think?
Well, it's not really the answer in the sense that even if people are kept behind bars for a longer period of time, which is what happened in most European countries over the last years, they end up free, mostly when they haven't committed an act that was violent enough to consider a very long term of imprisonment. So anyway, it's a matter of surveying people and looking after people for a long period of time after they are released and not for the time they are inside the penal system itself.
But in this case, the attacker was wearing a tag. He was supposed to be under surveillance, so it's a system failure?
It's not really a system failure in the sense that he was probably monitored in the location he was, but the fact that he was capable of running an attack is another question. That maybe I've been contacted with other people. What was the surveillance related to his surroundings, its personal relations with other members of such terrorist groups, maybe people in his families. So those issues are matters of intelligence more than matters of the penal system itself.
Is part of the problem, though, the fact that these types of offences, terror offences, are relatively new, and so the system, that the legislation is just not keeping up?
Well, it was maybe the case 10 or 15 years ago, but the legislation certainly has catch up to a certain extent. What matters is that the penal system in itself is not capable of keeping everyone in check. And it's not a matter of what the justicial system can do, but it's a matter of what surveillance systems are capable of doing on people that either were previous offender or people who are under watch but are not convicted yet.
Now, there was a knife attack, of course, here in Paris not that long ago with police targeted. So a knife attack in London now. Is this like the new normal, do you think, in Europe?
It's not really the non-normal. It's a question that it's possible that after the fall of the caliphate and the death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, there is a trend towards new strategies to try to get a more diffuse system of attack that is harder to prevent, harder to deal with for the security apparatus, and that can span a lot of panic over the public. So that can be a new strategy. And it's also likely that facing more rigorous surveillance, terrorist organizations are looking for new strategy that they can use to disrupt the existing status quo.
All right. Thank you very much indeed for your time and your analysis. Antoine Jardin, thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Now, in Iraq, the Prime Minister may have announced he's resigning, but protesters took to the streets again this Saturday. We understand that at least another 2 people have been killed. Anti-government protesters have been calling for an end to corruption. They want more jobs and better public services, and they've been asking for this since early October. More than 400 people have been killed in that time. Now, on Friday, the country's top Shiite cleric criticised the government, and then the Prime Minister said he was stepping down. Now, the rest of the cabinet is talking about this crisis. Here's our correspondent in Baghdad, Mustafa Katan.
First, they need to find a replacement for Adel Abdel Mahdi, and this will not be easy because Adel Abdel Mahdi came to office as a compromise choice at the first place. So it will be really hard for them to find a name that all political factions will agree upon. On the other hand, the protesters in the streets, they will refuse definitely whoever will come from the same political spectrum in Iraq right now. Also, some of them just asked to hold an election to select one and a single nominee directly by the people, which is right now seems to be impossible due to the now Iraqi constitution. So probably they will try to nominate some names and also try to pass them in the parliament. After that, then they will try to also to hold an early election, probably in a short period of time.
And now we turn our attention to Malta, where protests and the pressure on the Prime Minister Joseph Muscat to resign have intensified. This amid allegations that top aides of the Prime Minister's are linked to the 2017 murder of investigative journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia. 3 government officials resigned this week. They deny involvement. Solange Mougin has more.
Chanting mafia outside the Prime Minister's office, holding up photographs of murdered journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia, and demanding the Prime Minister step down. For the past 10 days, the slain journalist's family and protesters have expressed their outrage at the government in nearly nightly rallies. This time because the Prime Minister's chief of staff was released from custody without being charged, much to the ire of the son of the assassinated journalist.
We know nothing. My family knows nothing. The journalists know nothing. People know nothing. That's why we're here. It's completely absurd. The police released a statement on Facebook, 1 sentence. We investigated Keith Cambry, found no evidence, and released him. And they want us to believe that shit.
The Chief of Staff, Keith Shremby, denies any wrongdoing or involvement in the 2017 murder. But earlier this week, he and 2 ministers stepped down. And pressure has been mounting for the Prime Minister to do the same. At a press conference Friday, Joseph Muscat was adamant he'd remain in office and see the investigation through. But that was before the Maltese media began reporting of a divided cabinet and that the leader's resignation was imminent.
For us, this was not just a murder, this was a major case that shook our democracy.
With the government teetering, the main suspect in ordering the assassination, the Maltese tycoon Jorgen Fenech, was denied immunity Friday before being released on bail. He has accused the Prime Minister's chief of staff of being involved in the case.
And finally, events to mark the centenary of Merce Cunningham's birth are being held across the world. And here in Paris, tonight, about 100 dance students are performing in a tribute called Cunningham Times 100. Julia Kim has the details.
Embodying Cunningham, students at the Paris Conservatory are rehearsing extracts from his vast repertory. Each piece forms part of a greater whole, a mosaic of movements he defines as an event, and it's no small feat.
Cunningham is very rigorous. It resembles classical technique.
They're guided by 2 of his former dancers, Cheryl Terrien and Cédric Andrieux, who are passing on Cunningham's vision to the dancers of tomorrow, a vision that still has the power to shock.
It remains very radical to see how dance and music could be separated, to see how it didn't have to have a narration to exist.
Pure movement, unencumbered by convention, was Merce Cunningham's raison d'être. Considered too avant-garde in the United States, the American choreographer found fame in France from the 1950s. Over the span of 6 decades, he created nearly 200 works, probing the mysteries of life through dance.
I want to keep trying to learn about things I don't know about.
For these students, Cunningham times 100 is their unique interpretation of his life's work. 106 students will take to the stage of the Grande Halle de la Villette, which is just behind me, to perform what's being billed as the world's biggest event, a fitting homage to the man who is regarded as a titan of 20th century dance.
And that's it from me. Thanks for watching. Do stay tuned.